Thanks very much for that. Tell me, who is Curator designed for? Who's your primary target market?
Curator is designed for people that don't have analytics. And that's the slide that was quite near the end on who a Curator can replace. This one here. If your company is a small or medium enterprise, then chances are you can't afford to hire these three people. But by paying for software as a service solution like Curator, we will help build something that monitors your company in your specialty, the data you need to be able to improve your processes a little bit at a time. Save money and make more money.
Do we know how many of these companies there are?
How many companies are in the world? Every one of them needs a solution like this.
Thanks, Peter. Very nice and loud, clear speaking voice. I mean, you obviously spent some time on your presentation. The one thing that wasn't clear to me that you just clarified as a result of one of the questions was that it's a SaaS, right? I wasn't sure whether you were pitching a consulting business or a product that you, as a consultant, go in and modify for people. As a non-data analytics guy, I find this stuff to be fairly abstract in how does this even apply to me. And I think, and maybe it's just my own impression, that the presentation assumed too much from the audience in terms of knowledge of what you're talking about. Like right from your first slide when you had the different types of analytics up there. Patchwork, like, I have no idea what Patchwork Solutions is, right? And maybe that's just me, but I think explain it a little better. Like, I think you're assuming a bit too much about your typical audience. This audience probably knows more about what you're talking about. And then the other thing to bring it all together is, I think if you could come up with an example somehow, if you could create one, whether it's based on something real or just a hypothetical, and then kind of run through it so clearly identify what the problem is and how it relates to a business and how this actually is a solution for it.
Certainly. If I may address your concerns, Patrick, I was hoping to receive a question exactly like this, and I had in fact intended to leave this answer for the question period. To actually take an example, and to give an example, let's take an architecture firm, just to bring it in and show you that it works for everybody. An architecture firm that's trying to bring their numbers in under budget is going to need to know where the people are, what they're doing, what equipment they're using, where that equipment is, how much that equipment is being used, and be able to track all of these things in near real time so that they can see their resources are being used effectively. That's where we're going to take things like timesheets and things like the program that our colleague has just introduced us to and integrate those into a full-on solution that tells you those answers and works with sensors placed on the tools and sensors placed around the job sites to be able to make sure that we're not having workers sitting on their butts for 6 out of 8 hours. And that's how we use the Kanban processes of small improvements over long times to make more money for your company by knowing what's happening with those things. And that's where Curator comes in. It determines first as a consulting basis and then continuously as a software as a service what you need, how to collect it, and then getting it back to you.
So I would impress upon you, don't assume such an important piece of information would come out in a Q&A session. If it's that important, don't leave it to chance. You never get a chance to actually explain that. You probably won't. So make sure that is clearly articulated. I agree with Patrick. The problem solution thing wasn't articulated well enough. I'm left sort of wondering if when you said everybody could use this, wondering how I can use it. Can it help me do dishes and stuff like that. I mean, you gotta be very specific about what this does. This is a very common issue, so I'll sort of say this generically to everybody. Your solution may have multiple applications to multiple target client segments, but you'll never have a chance of getting to multiple target segments until much later on. So you have to focus in on something, be very clear on the problem for that segment, how you solve the problem for that segment, and that, that just wasn't clear in this presentation. So, I just really impress upon you that your next pitch to really, find a large segment, a homogeneous segment, tell a story about that segment, sort of like you just did with the architect, but lead with that.
Thank you, Rob. May I address that point just briefly?
Sure.
In Curator, our actual company, this is in fact what we are doing right now. We are working with the DSM-4 Personality Inventory, which is a pre-screening tool for psychological abnormalities. It contains 220 questions in 8 categories, and we are working with it and with a couple of wellness companies to develop an online version of it that is available to be taken online through your smartphone, on multiple sittings, 1 question at a time, then to be iterated and to show you what you may or may not need to be concerned about. That is our real use case.
So 2 things, and that should have been up front, and I still don't understand what it is. You gotta be clear. You gotta say it in the language of somebody who doesn't understand what that is and who would value that. I mean, we need to understand who would value that and what benefit they would get from using Curator to achieve whatever that is.